Welcome back to the Junkyard Pod. I'm your host, Tony Pesta, joined by my co-host, Jackson Flickinger, and today it's just us this time. We don't have a guest, but we have a lot of good Cavs stuff to talk about today. Jackson, how you feeling?
Feeling pretty good. You caught me right in the middle of taking a sip of water. I thought that you were just going to take it away, but I'm feeling
No,
great.
my bad. I had to get you in early. I was looking at my rundown here, so I didn't realize I caught you mid-sip. But we're going to talk about the Cavs today, and we're going to start off with something that I'm going to go on a very brief rant here. So maybe I shouldn't have flipped it to you right away because I do have some stuff to say about some of the conversation that has sparked again recently. And I think it's mostly a product of the Cavs had a couple days off and we are near the end of the season. There's not as much to talk about. So the Donovan Mitchell trade has, of course, been flying on Twitter. People have been getting their takes off, all started by a Brian Windhorst quote, which we'll get to in a second. But I do just want to start off by saying anyone who is still questioning this trade on either side should really just start questioning themselves, because this is about as close to a win-win trade as you can get. The Jazz got everything they wanted. The Cavs are pretty much as happy as you could be with what Mitchell has given them. Can you make the argument that perhaps the Cavs would be a better all-around team? Maybe they would be a little less top-heavy if they hadn't made the trade? Sure, but I think star talent matters in the NBA, and having a player like Mitchell puts the Cavs in a position that they would not be in if they hadn't made the trade. A stat that I want to pull up, which I think is very telling of how successful the trade has been. The Cavs are 10-1 this season without Garland. In those games, Mitchell is averaging 34 points, 7 assists, 5 rebounds on 48% shooting, including a game where he had 71 points. So that obviously boosts his numbers a little bit, but 34 points per game in the games without Garland. Lauri, as great as he is, as much as I love him, he has only had 7 games all season where he has scored 34 plus points. So when you get to the situation where it's so easy to overlook the impact that Mitchell has had with his scoring and the fact that just there aren't many players who can carry an entire offense the way he has, even as great as Lauri has been, without Mitchell, this Cavs season could have gone very, very differently. Jackson, I think I already know how you feel about the Mitchell trade, but do you have anything to add to that brief rant?
Yeah. So one of the things that I think we kind of get lost in is like in basketball, there's only 5 guys on the court at a time, and there's only one ball. So the goal in basketball is having the best player with the ball in their hands as much as possible. The Cavs have that with Donovan Mitchell. You have somebody who I think you can quibble about, like, can the Cavs win if he's the best player, et cetera. You can go down, you can talk about that, but I think Donovan Mitchell is a good enough offensive player where I think he can be the best offensive player on a title winning team. And, you talk about like the bench, like, yes, having 3 guys that could be in the rotation would be helpful. I don't really think if you had Obagi, Lowry, and Collin here, I don't think all 3 of them are in the rotation. Obagi definitely isn't. I don't know if Collin's in the rotation. Collin's had I do like
He's
Collin.
not been healthy. I think people leave that factor out.
And he just hasn't been good, honestly. And that's, and not like he hasn't been good in the sense of like we're like nitpicking. He just hasn't been good. Like he hasn't been good at the things that he does best. So really, if you're talking about this team, the only difference is you're swapping out Lowry for Donovan Mitchell. And Lowry is a great player, but Donovan Mitchell's a better scorer than him. Donovan Mitchell, and that's the thing is, like, Lowry, what he does best is score. I think he's an underrated defender. He's a good rebounder, but hey, the Cavs have that in their front court. So what he really does best is he's just a lights out shooter. It's like, yeah, the Cavs could use a lights out shooter, but Donovan Mitchell's a better off the dribble shooter. He's a better distributor. He can do stuff. He can create for himself on ball. Like, these are things that like Lowry struggles with. So it's like, I just don't know what this conversation is about this year. Especially this year. Like, I think going forward, I think it's still a slam dunk win by the Cavs. When you get the best player in the trade, you won the
9
trade.
times out of 10. Yeah.
Like that's like unless you're getting like, unless it's, the best player leaves in like AM year or two, then you got to like look at the trade again. But the Cavs got the best player. It looks like he's going to be here for at least 3 years. Would be pretty surprised if he's not on the team when the Cavs are giving up all those draft picks. I would expect that he's still on the team unless things go horribly wrong, which you never know. But it's just like, it just kind of comes down to like in basketball, like basketball is much different than other sports. Like in baseball, you can maybe argue that, 4 quarters equals $1, but in basketball, 4 quarters never equals a AM dollar. Like 2 50-cent coins don't equal AM dollar. 6 quarters don't equal AM dollar. You need star players to win in this league. You need guys who fit. You need guys who can take over games. You don't need 3 guys who can take over a game. You need 1 guy. And the Cavs have that, and they didn't have that before. They're a much better team. It just shows all the way through. The Cavs they've had really bad bench play at times. They've missed time with injury, but they still have the best net rating in the entire league. Why? Well, because you have Donovan Mitchell. Like that really helps. He's going to be an all NBA player. The Cavs are going to win 50 games for the first time in like a million years without LeBron. Like this isn't a conversation.
Yeah, I agree. Basketball is one of those team sports where like no one would argue that basketball isn't a team sport, but individual players can impact your outcome more than probably any other team sport. Like look at football, baseball, like you mentioned. In basketball, while yes, it is a team sport and you need help, you can have a guy like Donovan Mitchell who just goes out and dominates a game and gets you a win on his own. Or at least as close to doing it on his own as you can. And Cavs fans of all people should know that because we had the luxury of watching LeBron James, maybe the best player of all time at winning on his own, doing that for years and years and years. When it comes to the Donovan Mitchell trade, I feel like it's just so obviously a win at this point that it's unfortunate that we're still talking about it. And I do think it's unfair when people say, well, Mitchell could leave in 2 years or whatever. It's like, that's possible, but you can't judge this trade on that hypothetical. That's like doomsday. If Donovan Mitchell leaves the first chance he gets, then we did something wrong. You can't judge the entire trade based on that. So, and I think one last thing that I want to say that is key when talking about what this team would look like if they had Lowry instead is that, and you touched on it, Mitchell is a better on-ball shot creator. And that's what this Cavs team needed next to Garland. That's what they really, really struggled with not having last season. And Mitchell, Lowry's a great shooter. Mitchell is second in the NBA in pull-up three-point shooting. He is just a different type of shot creator. And a lot of the ways that Lowry does score, half of his touches come in the front court. And he's great at it. But if I'm picking and choosing, I kind of want as many touches in the front court as possible to go to Mobley where we're trying to develop him. And it's already – the touches there are already limited for Mobley. If we had Lowry on the roster, it would be even more limited for him. And also Lowry wouldn't be putting up the numbers that he is because he probably wouldn't be getting as many touches there in this Cavs offense. So I do just think it's a better fit. It gives the Cavs this, top heavy fighting power to compete in any series where they could have the best player on the floor throughout, some of these playoff series upcoming. So it's definitely a win in my book and for most sensible people. But I do want to focus on the Brian Windhorst quote now, which is, this is what he said about the Cavs and the Donovan Mitchell trade very recently. He said, they are in a difficult situation to go from a good team to an elite team. And then later on in the same quote, he says, the Donovan Mitchell trade has kneecapped them going forward. Jackson, do you think going all in on the Mitchell trade puts the Cavs in a bad position moving forward?
No. I mean, I love Brian Windhorst. I think he's one of the better NBA guys out there. I think he's great. I think he's completely wrong here, though, and I think he's kind of working under the assumption that you need to beat the 2017 Warriors, or you need to beat like the 2016 Cavs, or like the 2014 Spurs. Like that's who I think he's like saying the Cavs need to beat, and that's just simply not the case in today's league. Like this league has way more parity than ever, And it's really funny. I was planning on doing an article about how the Cavs have the best net rating in the entire league, but they're like, fifth in the overall league standings, which is that's something that hasn't happened in the last 10 years. But one of the reasons why that's happened is because the league has so much more parity. So like, if you look back if you go all the way back to 2013, the Thunder led the league in net rating. They had a 10.4 net rating. That means they were outscoring their opponents by 10.4 points per 100 possessions. 2015, the Warriors were doing it by 12.1 points. 2016, Spurs 11.7, 17 Warriors 12.7. You go forward a couple years to the 2021 Jazz were doing it by 11.6. And then we go to last season, that number drops to 8.5, which is the lowest it's been since 2014 for a team that's leading the league in net rating. Then you go to this year, the Cavs are leading the league in net rating in 6.2. Some of the best teams in the league, teams that we think of as elite teams, are like the Denver Nuggets, which are outscoring opponents by 4.1 points per 100 possessions, which is really not that good of a mark. So what that says is there's way more parity in the league now. So it means that, every night's going to be a battle, but it also means that like the top of the league's just not as good as it was like 5 years ago. This league is wide open. And with the way things are going, there's no reason to think that this is going to change anytime soon. Like, we had the Kevin Durant trade to Phoenix, but stars aren't moving like they were a couple of years ago. You don't need like a super team to compete. So that's what I think Brian Windhorst is missing with this little rant. And it's like the Cavs have the best net rating in the league. I think it's fair to say, hey, they're not going to go to the conference finals. I think that's fair to say that. At least at this point, there's no reason to think that they will. But it also undersells just how good this team has been and how close they are to, they have the best net rating. Like there's nobody better than them right now in terms of like outscoring your opponent, which is what the goal of basketball is. So it's like, I just don't like, they're just not far away from just being a championship level team.
Yeah. I love Wendy. I think he does a fantastic job. This is one take that felt like he missed the point a little bit. And to be fair, to his credit, I did not watch the full interview. He did give the Cavs plenty of praise. It's possible that maybe this is taken a little out of context, but I also think, this idea that as he said, the Cavs are in a difficult situation to go from a good team to an elite team. Like, it's always tough to make that leap, no matter who you are. Every team in the NBA is trying to take the leap from a good or great team to an elite team. And usually the difference in that scenario is adding a player like Donovan Mitchell, adding a superstar caliber player. When you look at the last even just decade of basketball and you think of the Raptors when they had Lowry and DeRozan and were struggling to make that leap, you have the Hawks who got steamrolled by the Cavs after being a very well-rounded team with multiple all-stars, but they didn't have that high-level superstar talent and they couldn't make that leap. Think of the Grizzlies, Marc Gasol, Mike Conley, the Celtics when they had Isaiah Thomas. Like there's all these different examples of really good teams that could never make the leap. And it's because they didn't have a star caliber player who is an all NBA caliber guy like Donovan Mitchell. And so, when looking at the Cavs and where they are now, I think you are going to be banking on a lot of internal growth in terms of getting better moving forward. And considering that, as you mentioned, they have the best net rating in the NBA, and they also have the youngest starting lineup of these contending teams by a wide margin, I feel pretty confident saying they probably will grow a little bit internally and they will improve. And they also have opportunities to improve on the margins where you have, these fringe bench rotation guys who it's possible we find upgrades there, whether it be, moving on from Danny Green, Jetty, Dean Wade, whoever. Like if you can fill in those spots with more talent, which is definitely going to be possible moving forward, then you can surround this core four with a strong enough supporting cast. I'm really not that worried about it. I think people pretend that the Cavs are just absolutely deadlocked and they're never going to be able to add more talent. I don't think that that's the case. I think This core is good enough to compete for a championship. They need to grow a little bit. They need to get some experience under their belt. But as you said earlier, Mitchell, I do believe, can be the sole or the primary focus on offense on a championship team. Maybe that's not ideal. Maybe you want Mobley to be the one to take the leap. I don't know. But I still think Mitchell on his own is capable of doing it. And the key here really is, like I said, growing internally and improving on those margins, which I think the Cavs are in a position to do. So, no, I'm not too worried about the fact that the Cavs went all in on this trade, because I think it's the exact type of trade that they needed to make.
And I think we're also forgetting how good Donovan Mitchell is in the playoffs. He's somebody that throughout his career, he's averaging 28.3 points in the playoffs. That's an insane number. In the bubble year, he averaged 36.3 points per game on an effective field goal percentage of 634. And I know that was 7 games. I know that was in the bubble. You can put all the asterisks you want on it. But this is a big-time player who plays his best in the playoffs when his team needs him most. Like, the Cavs got him for the playoffs, and we're all concerned about what the Cavs are going to do in the playoffs. It's like, I don't like, these concerns just aren't, like, they just don't make sense to me. You know, like the way that Windy was talking, it seemed like he thought the Cavs were like an OG Anunoby type player away from competing, not like Danny Green from last year away. Because if you throw Danny Green from last year that was on the Sixers before he got injured, if you throw him on this team, I think that would be like that would be a team where you're like, okay, like we wouldn't be favored against the Bucks, probably not, but like I think it'd be a really good series. I think it could be a toss-up. I think the Cavs would do a lot of things that would make the Bucks really, rely on their outside shooting to win. And then you have a guy like Danny Green who, in this hypothetical would be like the perfect 3 to go with that group. And, so it's like they're not, and it's not hard to find a 2022 Danny Green. Like you're not finding, that's not somebody who's like getting, like $25-30 million a year. Like he's somebody that you could find. So like the Cavs just aren't far. Like that's, and it's like, I guess if, like you were saying, like, if Donovan Mitchell leaves, then they're far. If, if Kevin Durant decided to somehow force his way to the Celtics and they didn't give up anybody, then well, they can't compete with that team. But guess what? Nobody could. So it's like, I just, it's just a lot of these complaints are just kind of like missing what the league currently is. And I think our brains were all broken when LeBron James was on this team for 4 years, where the Cavs, at least 3 years, where the Cavs were an elite team and they only won 1 championship. It's because they ran into like, a
greatest team of all time, possibly.
Right. Like a once in, like a team that we hadn't seen in 20 years, So it's just like, it was bad luck. And this league is wide open. If you get somebody into that 3 spot that makes sense, this is a team that could go far. Like if you have a hot Karis LeVert shooting month in the playoffs and you get good minutes from Jetty or Rubio or Danny Green comes back to life or fill in the blank, it's like, this team could go 6 games against the Bucks. Maybe, like this team isn't far. They're really good. And Evan Mobley's 21, like we're already talking about him. Like, it's kind of messed up that people think he's the 3rd best defensive player in the league instead of the 1st. He's 21. So
it's crazy.
It's like, guys, come on. Like I just don't even know what to say. It's like, if you watch this team, you see the problems. You see that there's holes around the margins, but the core 4 is so good and they fit so well. The hardest thing to do is find the guys that fit. It's like the conversation is like the Cavs were last year's team, where you could see, hey, if they grew up together, they could be a good team, but they could be a team that never really makes out of the second round or gets to the second round once. Like, but then they got Donovan Mitchell. Like, that's not the problem anymore. If they don't go to the second round this year, it would be a huge disappointment. It's like, they're just in a whole different ballpark than they were previously.
Yeah. As we've mentioned a couple different times on this pod, the hard part is over. The Cavs have done the hard part in getting those 4 players and specifically getting a upper echelon player like Donovan Mitchell. This is what I meant when I said improving on the margins and doing those little things to build a supporting cast, because when I brought up those examples of like the Raptors, the Hawks, these teams that had very well-rounded teams, they were very, very solid, deep teams, but they didn't have that star power. The Cavs have the star power. They've done that part. Now they need to find the supporting cast, which a healthy Danny Green could have been it. You look at the Warriors who won the championship last year. They got Otto Porter Jr. and Gary Payton for nothing. They got them for the mid-level exception. Those options are out there every year. You just have to hit on one of them. And part of it's luck. Part of it is, negotiating the right deal. But there's going to be opportunities. I don't think the Cavs are really saying they're in a bad position is just, that's crazy to me. They're in one of the best positions in the NBA. Like I said, it's always tough to make that leap. Every team in the NBA is trying to make the leap from good to great to elite. Every team in the NBA, even the contenders, have a small championship window that they're trying to capitalize on. If we're looking at everyone, I feel confident saying the Cavs probably have the biggest championship window. Now, that's obviously very unpredictable. Things could change. Mitchell could leave. Someone could get injured. You never know how the future is going to go. But saying they're in a bad position, it's like if the Cavs are in a bad position, then where's everyone else in the NBA? Because I can't imagine it getting that much better than where the Cavs are currently.
And another thing, the teams above them have been together for a long time. You look at like the Celtics, the Celtics core, they were going against LeBron, when he was on the Cavs. So they've been together, was that 6 years now? The Bucks have built it with Giannis and Middleton for years now. I know they added Holiday 3 years ago now. So it's like they've had their core together for periods of time, and it took them a while to gel. Like this group, it's they got Donovan Mitchell in September. Like they didn't even have an off season to work with him. It was just like, okay, we got Donovan. He showed up at a Browns game. Now it's training camp. So like that's basically like what the off season was for this core group together. So there's just so much room for internal growth, and I think there's obvious holes that the Cavs could fill. And like they don't need a lot. They're good. They have the best net rating. Like I know it doesn't. One of the things is like the Cavs they've lost games that they shouldn't have lost, especially in January, where they lost a bunch of close games by doing stupid stuff like the Karis LeVert 3-point foul in Utah, or the multiple whatever. They did stupid stuff to lose like 2 or 3 games that they should have won. And if they have those wins, you're looking at a team that's third in the league and possibly pushing second, depending on where the Celtics end up. So it's like this, they're good. They're going to be better if they don't change anything, but they're going to change stuff because their holes are obvious. And if me and you know about these holes, everyone knows about them. Kobe doesn't think that like, hey, we have too much shooting here. Anyways, it's just okay.
Yeah, I don't want to repeat myself too much because I'm sure I've said this on other podcasts too, but at the when you mentioned the Cavs have the best net rating, but they have dropped some games that have felt like they should win. I think the reason for that is that, or the reason why they have the best net rating is because when this team is clicking, they are killing teams. They are legitimately one of the best teams in the NBA when things are going right for them. It's just they have these holes and they have these issues that sometimes plague them. And one of the big things that most people talk about when you say, what's the deciding factor between the Bucks and the Cavs in a playoff series is the experience. The Bucks have been together for a very long time now. The Cavs just have not been together. And that's where you get the growing pains. That's where you get losing games that you probably, if this Cavs team had been together for 3 years, I'm sure they win a handful of the games that they dropped this year that felt disappointing, because a lot of it just comes with building, consistency and continuity in the roster. And, when you're, another aspect of being together, aside from just building chemistry, is you get to learn what your gaps are, and the front office has an opportunity to fill those gaps, which is where the Cavs are. It's like, all right, we know we need shooting. We're going to have again, listen, if Donovan Mitchell leaves the first chance he gets, then that's kind of doomsday. I feel like it's unfair to put any expectations on that. But assuming he does stay, we're going to get a couple different opportunities, a couple different off seasons, buyout markets, trade deadlines to address these issues. And I don't have any reason to think that Kobe Altman isn't trying to address these issues because, like you said, if we can see it, they can see it.
And like the Cavs used their mid-level exception on Ricky Rubio this year. If they had Donovan Mitchell, like if they knew Donovan Mitchell was going to be on the team, they wouldn't have used that on Ricky Rubio, or I'm guessing they wouldn't have, So it's just like this team just was never built for Donovan Mitchell. Like, what's the biggest move that they've made since the Donovan Mitchell trade? It's like
Sam Merrill.
Right, like Sam Merrill keeping Momedy, like they're not like they haven't had the opportunity to make many moves, and I guess kind of to Brian Windhorst's point, they can't make a ton of big moves, but it's like
they don't need the big moves.
Yeah, they still have tools. Like they don't like the biggest problem with the role players this year has been that they've sucked at times, which is a problem, but they also haven't really fit well. And like the reason they haven't fit well is because they weren't brought in with the idea of fitting around Donovan Mitchell. So you're going to have off seasons to do that.
Yeah. An adjustment period for sure. That's a good transition here to talk about the role players because there has been a mini bench renaissance in Cleveland. Very, very small. I wouldn't bet all my money on it continuing, but it's certainly encouraging to see the bench playing better at this point in the season where you're really going to need it. Throughout the year, the Cavs have ranked 27th in bench points per game, which of course, part of that is the pace they play. Part of that is the fact that the bench doesn't play as many minutes as other teams. Nonetheless, they were 27th in bench points. Over the last 5 games, they're 6th in bench points. They have been seeing a huge uptick in scoring and production from mainly 3 guys, Ricky Rubio, Caris LeVert, and Cedi Osman. So I want to go through each one of these guys and briefly talk about them, starting with everyone's favorite role player, Caris LeVert, to give a shout out to Corey, a former guest of ours. He has been coining the term the Caris resurgence because we have seen a resurgence from Caris LeVert.
It doesn't feels like quite roll off the tongue, Corey.
It looks better. It looks better in a tweet. When you say it out loud, it doesn't hit the same. But I had to give him a shout out.
Thank you, Corey. Come back on the pod.
Yes, definitely. We'll get him and Mac here, hopefully for some playoff talk soon.
Corey, Caris,
the Caris resurgence. It looks better on paper.
Yeah, looks better on paper.
Anyways, as we talked about adjustment periods, I think part of the reason why LeVert is playing better right now, aside from the fact that he is just in general a streaky player, and a case can be made that this is just him having a hot streak, I think he is becoming more comfortable in his role, something that he has been really working through the entire season, trying to find out where he fits, what he needs to do, and how it's all going to work. He's been clicking on both ends of the floor. Let me pull up the stats here real quick. Sorry, I had them up here. So over his last 6 games, LeVert is averaging 18 points, about 5 assists, 2 steals, shooting 54% from the floor, and he is committing just 1.3 turnovers per game. So his assist to turnover ratio has been great. He's shooting the ball lights out, above 50% from the 3-point line. He's playing fantastic defense. He's been going, two-way, picking up steals, going full court, coast to coast, just really jolting this Cavs offense when they need it. And so, Jackson, I want to flip this over to you. Are you ready to apologize to LeVert? No, I'm kidding. But what have you seen from LeVert recently? I don't need an apology.
Here's the thing with apologies. It's that Caris LeVert very much sucked, and he's had 6 good games. So it's like, like
that's why I said it could just be a hot streak.
Is he going to apologize to us for playing terrible for like 40-something games? Like, that's what I'm waiting for. But no, the one stat you forgot to mention that's the most important one. He's fouled 0 3-point shooters in 6 games. Like
he's really turned the corner.
Right. Those 4-point plays are killer. But so like his shooting's not going to continue. Like you said, he's shooting 50.
Above 50.
Yeah, he's shooting 51% from 3.
Yeah.
That's not going to keep going. But what's really encouraging is that he's shooting like over half of his shots are from three during this stretch. And I don't care if he's like making them, like was about like a 36% 3-point shooter this season. I just want him shooting those shots because he's the Caris LeVert's so frustrating because he seems like he creates decent looks in the mid-range, like especially like under the free throw line, but they just never go in. Like he's having an awful year with those shots, and he's taking a lot of those shots. So like those short mid-range shots, he's only completing 33% of them, which is lower than like a 3-pointer. So just kind of cutting that out and just shooting more threes, like that's what I want to see him keep doing, and that's what he's been doing recently. So like, that's if you're going to get excited, it's that more than half of his shots are coming from three. And before, like, so overall on the season, only 38% of his shots are coming from three. So it's like, this is a big improvement. This is why he's looked so much better, is because he's kind of playing within what the offense needs of him, but he's also still doing a good job of getting the bigs involved, and he still has those assist numbers. So just trying to find a way to balance, attacking, but also just being a spot up shooter. So just kind of trying to do, trying to bring the best elements of his game together is what he's done well. And hopefully that continues when the shot's not going down like it is now.
Yeah. The shot chart has improved. I think everything you said is right on point. I think just the way that he's playing, the decisions he's making has improved. And that's what you hope will carry over when the 3-point shot isn't falling at the rate that it's currently falling, because he's not going to shoot 50% for the next month or so. It's going to come back down to earth. What you want to see is that he's going to continue making these same decisions, taking the shots that are in the flow of the offense, and not doing the mid-range stuff that we have struggled with all year from him. Cutting out the mid-range shot is like the biggest thing that he needed to do. And up to this point, the last few games, it seems like maybe someone has gotten through to him to stop taking those. Although he did make one last night against who did they play last night? It's completely blanked. Brooklyn, the Nets. He did make a mid-range shot against his old team. So
he did make two. So
two of them. I missed one.
It's one thing, like, it's fine to take like two a game. It's just the problem is like I believe he took 6 3-pointers yesterday. Something like I believe he took 6 yesterday. It's like, we need you taking 6 3-pointers and 2 mid-range shots, and not 3 3-pointers and 4 mid-range shots. Like that's the balance you can't live with, especially when he's not finishing at the rim. Yesterday, he did a really good job of not finishing at the rim, but drawing contact and shooting fouls when he was going to the rim, because that's kind of like the frustrating thing is like Caris, when he's at his best, he's kind of getting downhill, doing that little like herky jerky dribble thing, but then also like seeing an opening and throwing it to Evan or throwing it to Allen. But sometimes when the defense closes that off, he just kind of stops and kind of like freezes, and then just takes like a shot that he like is unprepared to take almost. So that's where it's like, you just want to see him still do what he does best, but just kind of cut down that shot.
Yeah, I'm with you on all of that. Moving forward, unless you have more LeVert stuff to say, I want to talk just very briefly about Rubio, because
one thing about Caris that I made fun of his like 3-point shooting, defense, where he's always fouling guys. But Caris LeVert has been a really good defender this year.
Yes.
You know, when we talk about before the season started, everyone was talking about like who should be the starting 3, and it was like, well, Caris can't play any defense, so he can't be the starting 3. But Caris has played really good defense, and I think that's something fantastic. That's something that we should like bring up, where he's sometimes he gets a little jumpy at times, where he seems like he like leaves his guy, or he's too far off his guy, and then tries to make up for it by like jumping out of position. And that's where you see those like flagrant fouls for taking away the landing space. He's done a good job of cutting down on that. But even when he was doing that, he was still a good defender and mostly in the right positions. So I just want to say that's you can live with some like mid-range shots and you can live with some of his awards when he is a good defender like he has been this year.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because we definitely don't want to overlook the way he's been playing defensively has been fantastic. He has been a really good on-ball defender, really against most matchups. Of course, he's had some lapses. He's been out of position at times, but especially as of late, he has really been locked in. He's playing great defense, getting a lot of steals. He's really just provided so much energy to this team, and he's a versatile defender as well. Like you can play him against guards. He can switch out onto the wing. He's been doing a very good job of holding his own pretty much in any matchup he's been in. So moving over to Rubio, I don't have too much to say because I think, we kind of know what Rubio is. I think most of it comes down to, is he going to be making shots or not? And earlier in the season, it seemed like he was kind of coming back slowly from his injury. Didn't really seem like he was in the flow of things. He's turning the ball over a lot. Wasn't hitting shots, which he's never really been much of a shooter to begin with, so I think people weren't expecting too much there. But over the last few games, Rubio has looked a lot better. I think some of that rust is finally coming off. Looks like he's in a better flow of things. Looks like he's making better reads. He's in more control, and he has been scoring slightly better. I'm not fully sold on him being back yet. I think we still have, quite a lot that we want to see from him. But how do you feel about the way Rubio has played recently? Because I think it's encouraging.
I think Rubio's played really well recently. I think he's done his shot's still not going in, and he's taking, he's not a good 3-point shooter. And there were times last season where it felt like when his shot was going in, and it was like, oh wow, like Ricky Rubio is so helpful for this team, and like his shot's just not going in, like especially his outside shot. So, it seems like there's still a couple times where it's like I kind of don't really want Ricky shooting the three that much, just because it's like not what he does best. So, aside from that, though, I think we are seeing some really good things from him. And one of the things that I think is most encouraging is whenever I would like talk about Ricky Rubio last year, it'd be like, we'll just look at his like on-off numbers. They're just so good. Like he's able to, like his real numbers, like his like counting stats don't look good, but his impact stats are just great. Like they play so well with him on the floor. And we're starting to see that again. So one of the things that like a couple weeks ago, one of the things that I was really like looking at was like his numbers with Karis LeVert were really bad. And I felt like that kind of made sense just because they're similar type players where like Karis LeVert isn't someone who was shooting a lot of threes. Ricky Rubio is not someone who's a great shooter. They both kind of need the ball in their hands. So it kind of made sense. But then when they took Dean Wade out of the lineup, those numbers just completely flipped. So like the impact stats with Ricky Rubio on the floor and Dean Wade off the floor have been crazy good. So like in his minutes without Dean Wade, the Cavs have a 8.1 net rating and a 107.6 defensive rating, which are both like very good. So they are playing so well with Rubio out there now. And I don't want to like pin this all on Dean Wade. I think he just hasn't been himself. He was in a very bad funk, and it's just hard to play with somebody who is really not giving you a whole lot on either end of the floor. Hopefully Dean Wade gets right, but it just kind of illustrates that, maybe Rubio in the right context could still be really helpful, even if you look at him and you don't say, and you think like, oh yeah, he's not as good as he was before. So that's kind of what's getting me a little more excited about him, is that those impact stats are coming back and he's fitting well with that bench lineup that we're seeing of like Lamar Stevens, he plays well with Jetty, Karis. So that's what I'm most excited about.
Yeah, for a minute there, I was getting pretty down on Rubio just because it seemed like it just wasn't there for him at all. And now that we have seen some little flashes that he can be productive, that he can be in winning lineups for the Cavs, I think that's very, very encouraging. and it could be important entering the playoffs. I'm not fully sold on Rubio being back just yet, but who I am sold on is Cedi Osman. I'm kidding. I'm not fully sold on Cedi either.
No,
But
we
Cedi
are.
has been. We are okay. Screw it. We're just going for it. Cedi has been playing probably his best basketball of the season for a very short spurt here. Over his last 4 games, he's averaging 14 points per game. He is shooting 14 of 25 from the 3-point line, which is 56%. And overall, he's a plus 42 in 100 minutes, which he's the plus minus king. He's been near the top all season in terms of that. But Jackson, what are you thinking of King Cedi right now? Has he earned a spot in the playoff rotation, especially with Wade, the way he's playing? Do you think Cedi is going to be kind of in that 8-man group?
So I've always been pro Cedi, just because I think he does a lot of things that the Cavs need. He's not a good shooter. Like, he's a very streaky shooter, but he takes the right shots, and he's a really good mover off ball, which is something that they don't really have from the wing right now. Like, even though, like, Karis LeVert's okay, I guess, but like nobody else in the rotation is really good at that. And he plays like lineups with him out there just play a lot faster, and he's able to get in transition more. That's something I think this team needs. So I've always been pro Cedi, especially when you have a team that has guys like Okoro and Stevens and Jared Allen and Evan Mobley who aren't shooters. And yes, I know there's other ways to provide spacing, but it's like, it's a lot easier to do it with shooting than it is, without. So he's somebody who I always think should be in the rotation. And one of the things that I think has been really interesting recently is that, with Jared Allen out, like we saw this in the game against Philadelphia that they lost last week, where the Cavs, the Sixers were putting Embiid on either Okoro or Stevens, allowing PJ Tucker to guard Mobley, and then just using Embiid as like a free safety, which kind of like just, slowed the whole offense down because basically just had a free safety. So then the Cavs went with Karis LeVert and Cedi Osman, and Cedi was effectively playing the 4. And anyone who's been a diehard Cavs fan for the last couple of years know that Cedi at the 4 lineups just don't really work defensively and have not really worked defensively before. But having Evan Mobley and Jared Allen helps. It's a lot better than having Larry Nance and Tristan Thompson and Hartenstein or whoever.
JaVale
McGee. The lineups work a lot better when you have an elite shot blocker out there. And it just opens up the whole offense. And, we hadn't really seen those lineups a lot, especially when fully healthy. But against the Nets last night, they ran it to start the second quarter, and they scored 30 points in a 9-minute span, which is very good for this Cavs team. And it's something that I would keep an eye on all season, just like for the rest of the season, to see if that's something that JB is going to go with. Like, it's not going to work against every team, obviously, because in that Sixers game, the offense was really good, but they gave up 1 million rebounds because they had nobody who could get any rebounds, and that's why the Sixers were able to win. So it's like not a perfect lineup, but it's one that you can go to when you need to. And I'm interested to see how JB manages that going forward. But this is a long way of saying, yeah, I think the good version of Cedi should be in the rotation. I think the bad version of Cedi should be in the rotation over some other guys, but we'll just see. We'll see how that all plays out.
Yeah, it's, you never quite know if Cedi is in the rotation or not. Feels like he just is constantly in and out of it, depending on how JB feels. I do think that, I think it was the Detroit game before the game, they mentioned that JB is kind of feeling out these last couple games to see who's going to be in the playoff rotation and who's not. Like he's got to solidify it at some point. And to this point, Cedi has been getting fairly consistent minutes. So, and Wade has been in the doghouse. Wade has really not been on the floor. So that suggests to me that if I had to guess, the playoff rotation is probably going to include LeVert and Rubio as the 2 men off the bench. And then it's going to be Cedi and Stevens, I would assume, as the next 2 guys where you they're interchangeable depending on what you need in any specific scenario. Is Cedi having a really bad game? Maybe you put Stevens in. Even if Cedi is having a bad game, I think maybe you throw him out there. Maybe you give him minutes at the 4 and just try to experiment and get this offense going, because there really is nothing quite like a Jetty 3-pointer. It frees up everything. He's great at moving off the ball, at least compared to the rest of the members of the team that aren't Garland or Mitchell. And so when you have a guy like that, and he's very streaky, but if you get him at the right time, I mean, it gives the Cavs a punch that few teams can really match. And it's funny to say that about Jetty, because he's at best like a fringe rotation player. But when he's having a good game, it is really, really tough to beat the Cavs. And that has been the case for like the last however many years. He's one of the weirdest players. He's an anomaly. When he's on fire, the Cavs can do anything. And so I don't think he'll ever manage to balance those highs and lows, but he is swinging upwards right now. And if it happens at precisely the right time as we enter the playoffs, it could make the Cavs a very, very fun team and a dangerous team. If you have a guy like Jetty, you can come in and shoot, throughout a series above 50% from the 3-point line, because he's just feeling himself.
Yeah. And one of the things about Jetty is that he just makes, he provides spacing that nobody else really can, and his movement off ball, it opens up everything for everybody else. So that's why I say bad Jetty is still better than like no Jetty, just because you don't really have anybody else in the rotation who can open things up for everyone else. The thing that you need from Jetty is you need good defensive effort, and we've seen that for a lot of this season, and we also need him to play in control. Sometimes it feels like Jetty sometimes presses too much, especially when he's like in transition. Sometimes you see him try to take it up like 1-on-2, and you're like, Jetty, What are you doing? So you just need to avoid the Jetty, what are you doing moments. And I'm fine with, you shared on Twitter last week, like a clip of all of his air balls and swishes from the Sixers game, which is funny, but it's like, I'm fine with the air balls. It's just, I don't want to airball if like someone's 1 inch from him, It's like if he's playing within the flow of the offense and providing energy on both ends, then that's really helpful. And one thing that I think we should mention is that the Cavs have 4 guys who are going to be getting 35 plus minutes, maybe even 40 minutes in the playoffs, with their core 4. So it's like, you don't really need a whole lot of minutes from the rest of your rotation. This isn't like some previous Cavs teams where it was like, okay, LeBron's going to play 40 something minutes. Now we just got to find 4 other guys who can just kind of hang on out there. Like, that's not what's happening here. So you don't Jetty's not going to be asked to play like a 20-minute per game role in the playoffs unless he's like cooking, same with Rubio. Rubio's not going to be playing that much. Like Karis LeVert, I think it's fair to expect him to, but so it's like, you don't need a whole lot from Jetty. You just need good Jetty in short spurts. And I think he can do that. And it's the same thing with like Lamar. Like if it's a matchup that makes sense, like that Celtics game earlier this month where they were just leaving him and he was able to just get every single offensive rebound, maybe he makes sense in a short spurt like that. So that's kind of what the Cavs need from their non-Karis LeVert role players. Same with Isaac Okoro too, honestly, because I don't think Isaac may start.
He could be played off the court.
Right. Like, I think he may start games in the playoffs, but Karis LeVert's going to be playing starter minutes for this team.
Yeah. As far as the role players, they're going to need spot minutes. Like you said, they're just going to need kind of those, like Lamar Stevens against the Celtics, where he comes in and makes an impact. Jetty, where he comes in and makes an impact. And I think since they have the core 4, since they have, these players who are going to be playing heavy minutes, the bench guys, like if Lamar Stevenson comes in and has that impact, that's just a luxury at that point. If he doesn't, it hurts. And at times it can feel, throughout the season, we have really worried about the bench. Like, are they going to sink the ship? I think if we're looking glass half full, the good news is that most of those guys like Stevens and Jetty have proven that they can do it in spurts. Like, it's possible. You just have to get kind of lucky and catch them on the right night. But if you pull the right strings and you put them in at the right time, they could help you get over any struggles that you're having in a game. So that's a reason to be optimistic. Of course, there are plenty of reasons to feel worried that maybe they'll all be slumping at the same time. You mentioned Okoro, which I think is interesting because the playoffs are a different beast, and Okoro is going to get picked on a lot offensively when it comes to the playoffs. Very quickly, we'll talk about the Knicks. I want to save most of the discussion for like a full in-depth preview because it's basically all but certain the Cavs are going to be playing the Knicks in the first round. It's possible it could change, but it's pretty much guaranteed it's going to be the 4-5 matchup. I just want to get your immediate thoughts. What stands out to you immediately when you realize, all right, it's Cavs Knicks first round?
I think this is a good matchup for the Cavs. Like, I know they'd rather play the Nets, and I think you know why, because when they played the Nets on Tuesday, there was a moment in the game where you're like, wow, the Cavs might have the 4 best players on the court, you know? So it's like, yeah, they'd rather play the Nets. But I think the Knicks are a good matchup for them. The Knicks have been playing really well, but what the Knicks do best, I think, are things that the Cavs have a pretty decent counter for. So, like, what the Knicks have done best is they have the 5th offensive rating in the league, which is very good, but they have the 21st effective field goal percentage. So, how are they getting good offense? Well, they're getting it because they don't turn the ball over. They're 5th in the league in turnovers, and they're 2nd in the league in offensive rebounding. So, and they get to the line a bunch. They're 9th in free throw rate. So it's like, those are things that I think the Cavs have good counters for. The Cavs are a team that don't turn the ball over. They're good at forcing turnovers, and they're a good rebounding team. And if they're really good at protecting the rim. They're really good at, Evan Mobley. One of the things that we always talk about with Evan Mobley that sets him apart is that he can play good defense and not foul. So, and Allen's like that too, but to a lesser extent. And then on the other end, the defense is kind of the opposite. They have a pretty bad defensive rating. They're 19th in the league, and they give up a bunch of offensive rebounds, and they don't get any turnovers. So it's like, I just think this profiles as a team that the Cavs do match up well against. I know they lost 2 games to them, but those 2 games were really weird. That was one of the games was without Garland, I believe. And that was the game there that there was like an NBA record for travels where they were just trying to call travels. And then the other game was when Julius Randle made every single 3, and then Donovan Mitchell decided to miss like 7 shots in the last 2 minutes of the game.
And one of them was a foul, just for the record.
One of them was a foul.
Report confirmed it was a missed call.
Everyone knows the 2-minute report is what actually matters.
Yeah.
But so it's like, I just don't like, if the Cavs, like, just because the Cavs profile good against them doesn't mean they can't lose. They can lose to anybody. That's kind of how sports work. But if they did lose, it would be really disappointing. Like, this is a team that they should beat.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely. I know there's been kind of this hype for the Knicks building up, and I've seen a lot of Cavs fans say that they're worried about the Knicks. I know that this could backfire, so I'm going to be careful choosing my words, but I'm not really afraid of the Knicks. I think this is a very good matchup for the Cavs. Could they lose? Yes, 100%. Anything could happen. It's the playoffs. I don't think the Cavs are so incredibly better than the Knicks that there's no chance that they could lose, but I do think this is a very good matchup for them. I think when you look at the 2 players that the Knicks have that really lead everything they do, Randall and Brunson, I think the Cavs match up with them better than, maybe anyone in the league. When you have Allen and Mobley in the front court, that's about the best you can possibly do in terms of defending opposing big men. Sure, you can make the case that there are individual players who are better. Maybe you want Bam, maybe you want Brook Lopez or someone, but when you combine Allen and Mobley together, that's about as best as you could do to hold a player like Randall. And the Cavs have done a good job against Randall outside of that game where he was just lights out from 3. Even if you count that, he's shooting 23 for 53 against the Cavs this season. That's 43%. Again, with that outlier game where he was just red hot. And then the same thing with Jalen Brunson. You look at Isaac Okoro, and that is like, now, will he be able to stay in the game? Will he be picked on offensively and played off the court? It's possible. But in terms of who Okoro defends better than anyone else, it's guards like Brunson. He is built for that matchup. He is born for that type of player to defend. And he is holding Brunson. Well, the Cavs are holding Brunson to 20 of 48 shooting, 42% in their games together. And when you watch those shot attempts from Brunson, I mean, Okoro is all over him. He's forcing him into some incredibly difficult shots. So those two factors right there make me encouraged, because the two best players the Knicks have, the Cavs match up with them very well. And I think Mitchell and Garland, there's a very strong case to be made that they will end up being the two best players in that series. You know, Garland is maybe the one that you're a little questionable. There's someone, Randall could certainly outplay him. Brunson could certainly outplay him. But I think Mitchell is most likely going to be the best player on the floor, which helps a lot. The last thing that I want to bring up here is that the Knicks are 22nd in three-point shooting percentage, and they're 8th in three-point attempts. So they shoot a lot of three-pointers, and they don't really make that many. They don't shoot a good percentage. That's kind of the entire Cavs game plan defensively, is to let teams shoot three-pointers when they're not exactly good shooters. Don't get me wrong, they let good shooters shoot a lot of three-pointers too. But if you are looking at how the Cavs play defense, they're probably going to say, hey, Julius Randle, try and beat us from the three-point line. Any of these other guys on the Knicks, go ahead and beat us from the three-point line, because we're going to pack the paint. We're going to do what we do best. And the Knicks have proven they'll shoot the three-pointer even when they're not making it. So I think that's another factor that just tips the scales towards the Cavs in my eyes.
Yeah, I was about to bring that up. It's like, what kills the Cavs? Three-point shooting, especially three-point shooting bigs. And it's like, I don't think the Knicks really have the ability to expose that. And they're also one of the worst teams at finishing at the rim. They're only finishing 64.5% of their shots at the rim, which is 25th in the league. It's like the Cavs could get into problems if they can't rebound and they allow the Knicks to just get to the line a bunch, and they, turn the ball over a bunch, something like that. But it's like, there's just a lot more avenues for the Cavs to win. And I think they're a better team. I don't know. Like, I'm just not super nervous about them, but we'll see. If Donovan Mitchell plays terrible, anything's possible.
Yeah, of course. I don't want to get any too hot takes here. I don't want to say that the Cavs are going to sweep anyone, but I do feel really good about the Knicks matchup. It's not something that I'm very afraid of. I think
we are 57 minutes into this podcast. If you want to get a hot take off, this is when you do it. This is your podcast.
That's true. I'm going to save it. I'm going to save the hot takes for when we do our full preview of the Knicks Cavs matchup, because of course it could change. Maybe they'll end up playing the Nets. Probably not. But we're going to do a full episode breaking down the Knicks Cavs matchup eventually here soon. We'll get more in depth. I have a lot more that I want to say. I was thinking of bringing it to this pod, but as you said, we're 57 minutes in. I think it's probably about time to wrap it up. I think we did a good job, getting our immediate thoughts on the Knicks matchup. We'll have time to really go in depth and explain why I feel the Cavs are going to sweep the Knicks in the playoffs, or wrap it up in 5. It could go to 6 or 7. If I had to bet, I would say they're going to wrap it up in 5, but we'll see. Any closing thoughts here?
Katie didn't go to the Knicks, so I'm not concerned.
Exactly. Yeah. Julius Randle just doesn't scare me the same way Giannis does. Everyone, I'm sorry. I don't know what to say. I think there were some people tweeting that they would rather play the Celtics than the Knicks. Maybe I'm misremembering that. Maybe it was about the 76ers instead of the Celtics. I don't remember. The point is, there was a lot of Knicks hysteria going on Twitter, and I feel like everyone needs to calm down when it comes to Julius Randle. He's not that guy, in my humble opinion.
I think you need to just clean up your Twitter followers.
It
seems like
that could help
problem.
A little bit. Honestly, it's always just like one or two people. The vast majority of people are perfectly reasonable. They're saying perfectly fine things. And then I'll find like that one guy who says something insane, and that's all I take away from it. So that's a me problem. I'll have to work on that for the next episode. But Jackson, thank you as always. Everyone, thanks for listening. Go ahead and subscribe. Follow me and Jackson on Twitter, and go Cavs.
I agree. Go Cavs.